I was standing at the counter of the First County Bank on a gray Thursday morning when the clerk looked up from her screen and said words that stopped my breath. "You are $15,400 behind on your loan." I blinked at her, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me." She repeated it slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Your loan account is delinquent. The overdue balance is $15,400. My voice was flat, my hands pressed against the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I have never taken out a loan." The young clerk glanced at the screen again, then at me, her eyes shifting with that uneasy look people get when they sense trouble they do not want to touch. She printed a statement and slid it across the counter. There it was, in black ink, my name, my address, the account number. A loan dated March 12th of this year. Monthly payments missed in April, May, June. Late fees added in neat rows. Total due, $15,400. I stared until the numbers blurred. For 40 years I had guarded my credit as if it were my last shield. I had paid every bill on time, even when I was working 3 jobs and eating canned soup for dinner. My mortgage, my utilities, my medical bills. Never once had I let a payment slip. And now the bank was telling me I was a debtor. I folded the statement carefully and placed it in my purse. My voice did not rise. My face did not crumple. I only said, "I will see to this." Then I walked out into the sharp air, my legs shaking as if they did not belong to me. Outside the bank, I sat on the cold stone steps with the statement folded in my lap. The world went on around me. Cars sliding past on Main Street. A mother tugging her child across the crosswalk. 2 men arguing over a parking ticket. But for me, time had stopped. 40 years I had lived with discipline. 40 years of writing checks the day they arrived. Of balancing my ledger on Sunday evenings with a pencil so worn I sometimes sharpened it down to the metal. When my husband died young, I cleaned at night, shelved books each morning, cared for the elderly in the afternoons. I remember falling asleep on the number 7 bus, my head hitting the window, only to wake and hurry to the next shift. Every dollar mattered. Every bill was a test of my resolve. I protected my credit like a fragile inheritance. It was my good name, my insurance that I would never be left begging. I told myself that as long as I paid on time, the world could not accuse me of negligence or dishonesty. Even when I sold my wedding ring to cover the gas bill in February of 1989, even when I borrowed $10 from a neighbor to buy cough syrup for my son, I always returned what I owed. Always. Now this paper said I had failed. I unfolded it again, tracing the printed dates. March 12th. That week I had been homesick with influenza, my head full of fever, unable to leave bed for 3 days. I remembered the sound of the mailbox clattering, the pile of envelopes that I did not touch until the fever broke. Could someone have taken my documents then? I could not imagine it. I had locked my door. I thought of my little house, the drawers where I kept my tax returns in neat manila folders, the fireproof box with my deed and insurance papers. Every file in order, every receipt pinned. I had lived alone for years now. No one else touched those papers. No one else should have had access. Loneliness pressed against my ribs. I thought of evenings when I sat by the radio with only the hum of the refrigerator for company, calculating how to stretch my pension check over 30 days. I thought of the phone calls from friends that dwindled over time, until birthdays passed in silence. My family, my only son and his wife, visited rarely, always busy, always short of money. And yet, in spite of all that solitude, I had never felt truly powerless until that moment outside the bank, holding a debt that was not mine. I walked slowly home, the statement rustling in my purse like a live thing. Passing the bakery, I remembered the times I had gone without bread to pay the electric bill. Passing the pharmacy, I remembered skipping medication so I could buy school shoes for my grandson. I unlocked my front door and stood in the narrow hallway, looking at the framed photographs on the wall. My son's graduation, my grandson as a toddler in a striped sweater, my late husband with his fishing rod. All of it proof of a life where I had given more than I kept for myself. And yet I was alone with this crisis. No one knew. No one would know unless I told them. I set the statement on the kitchen table and opened my ledger. The pages showed line after line of regularity. March rent $650 paid, gas $92. 14 paid, pharmacy $38. 47 paid. The last entry was a small grocery purchase, $23. 19. Everything in balance. No loan. No delinquency. I felt the sting of betrayal without knowing yet who had betrayed me. It was as if some unseen hand had erased the record of my diligence and replaced it with a history of irresponsibility. And what frightened me most was how easily a single document could undo decades of careful living. That night I did not sleep. I sat by the lamp reviewing every receipt, every bank statement until my eyes burned. My life was a paper trail of sacrifice. The 20 years of double shifts, the nights spent sewing other women's dresses for extra money, the decades of saying no to myself so I could say yes to others. All of it was there in numbers and ink. And now, alongside those neat columns, sat this false account of debt, $15 for 100, a sum that could swallow my savings whole. I whispered into the silence of the room, I have never taken out a loan. The words sounded brittle, like a prayer spoken to no one. It was early evening, I was boiling pasta and listening to the evening news when I heard the key turn in my front door. Only 2 people had keys besides me. My heart sank before my mind caught up. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped into the hallway. Ethan, my grandson, stood there with his wife Mara behind him, each holding a cardboard box of takeout as if dinner could soften anything. He had my son's eyes and my late husband's dimple. He also had a nervous twitch that came out when he was about to lie. It flickered in his left cheek now. "Grandma," he said brightly, walking toward the kitchen like it was his own house. "We brought pizza. Your favorite. Half mushroom, half plain." "I did not ask for dinner," I said. "Close the door." Mara shut it with her foot and followed him in. She set the boxes on my counter and began opening cupboards without permission, looking for plates. She always did that. She called it being helpful. I called it practice. I moved the pot off the burner and turned down the radio. "Say what you came to say." Ethan's smile was too wide, his voice too light. "We had a little situation this week. Nothing big." I pulled out a chair and sat. I did not invite either of them to sit. The steam from the pasta curled in the air between us. The clock on the stove read 6:43. He leaned against the counter, then straightened, then leaned again. His cheek twitched. "You know how you always tell me to be practical? We were being practical." Mara reached for my glasses case on the table, the one I kept beside my ledger, as if she meant to tidy my things for me. I moved it an inch toward my elbow. She drew her hand back and tried a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Ethan," I said, "speak plainly." He did not meet my gaze. His voice softened, almost affectionate, the way he sounded at 8 years old when he confessed to breaking a window. "We took a loan in your name. You do not use credit. We will pay it back." I felt nothing at first. Then the room sharpened around me, every detail bright as glass. The sauce bubbling, the oven light reflecting off the kettle, the bank statement folded in my purse like a blade. "In my name," I repeated. "You took out a loan in my name." Mara rushed to fill the space. "It was only because the rate was good and your credit is perfect. Ours is still recovering from that hospital bill last year. It is temporary. 3 months, maybe 4. We will make every payment, I swear." "Which bank?" I asked. "And what date?" "First County," Ethan said, relief blooming across his face as if details meant agreement. "March 12th. It was so fast. The clerk said older customers get priority offers, so it was practically meant for you. We did not want to bother you with paperwork." I looked at the stove clock. 6:45. The same date as the statement. The same bank. The same tone my clerk had used when she told me I was behind. "You forged my signature," I said. No tremor. No raised voice. Just the facts set down on the table like a heavy book. Ethan flushed. "It is not like that. We had your information. You gave me copies when I helped you with the tax refund in February, remember? I kept them safe. I knew you would not mind because you always say your credit is for emergencies and family is family. This was an emergency." "What was the emergency worth?" I asked. "In dollars." Mara answered quickly. 20,000 to consolidate. But the disbursement was staggered, so only part is active. The bank said you have a grace period before fees and we are inside it. We will make the first payment next Friday. Ethan starts a new route on Monday. It is handled. I open my ledger. The pencil lay across the middle like a line in sand. The bank says I am $15,400 behind. Mara pressed her lips together. That is impossible. Maybe they misapplied something. Ethan lifted a palm, soothing. Grandma, please. You know I would never hurt you. You do not even use credit. You are retired. You always tell me you just pay things in cash. I tell you I pay what I owe, I said. I do not owe this. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a coaxing whisper I had heard him use on shop clerks when he wanted a discount. It is just paper. We will fix it. You will not have to do anything. If calls come, just forward them to me. If letters come, just hand them over. You will not see a cent leave your account. I turned to the drawer where I kept my documents. The key was on a plain ring with a brass tag that read box. I held it up. Say the exact words again. Ethan blinked. Which words? The ones you rehearsed. He swallowed. For a moment I thought he might try another angle, some softer plea. Instead he recited as if he had been taught. We took a loan in your name. You do not use credit. We will pay it back. Good, I said. Now you will listen. I unlocked the drawer and pulled out a folder labeled identification. Inside were copies of my social security card, my driver's license, my Medicare card, my voter registration. All the numbers were there, the pieces people think of as me. I set the folder beside the bank statement. You used these, I said. You used my life on paper. Ethan stared at the documents as if seeing them for the first time. Grandma, it is still us. We are family. We are not strangers. The bank made it easy. They said remote verification is normal now. Normal, I said, is not the same as lawful. Mara's voice thinned. Please do not be dramatic. If you call the bank now, they will freeze everything. We just need a little time. How much time? I asked. 3 months, Ethan said. 90 days and then we can refinance under Mara's name. Her score will be up by then. We read about it. The kettle clicked off. I did not move to pour. My hands were steady on the table. You are asking me to carry a fraud for 90 days. Ethan's face crumpled at the word. Please do not say that. It is not fraud if we make the payments. It is just a favor. You always help. You helped with my community college tuition. You helped when the car broke down. This is the same, just with paperwork. No, I said. This is the same as someone walking into my house and taking the deed off the wall. Silence settled in the kitchen like ash. At 6:53, a car horn sounded on the street. A dog barked. Somewhere a neighbor closed a window. Mara drew a breath, softened her tone, and reached for the old weapon. We meant to tell you sooner. We only hesitated because you have had such a hard winter. You get overwhelmed. Memory can be tricky at your age. We wanted to spare you the stress. I looked from her to Ethan. He would not meet my eyes. His cheek twitched again. You have spared me nothing, I said. You have only announced who you are. Ethan put his hands out, palms up, as if offering me invisible proof. Just sign one form that says you consented. Backdated to March. We brought it. That way the bank audit will not flag anything, and there will be no trouble. He reached into his backpack and produced a manila envelope. He slid it across the table next to my ledger. The flap was already unsealed. Inside I could see a single sheet with a neat signature line and my name typed beneath it. I did not touch it. I folded the bank statement once, then again and slipped it back into my purse. The purse closed with a quiet snap that sounded to me like a door. You will take your pizza, I said. And you will leave now. Grandma, Ethan whispered, astonished. We are trying to fix this. You cannot fix what you broke with the same hands that broke it, I said. Go home. Mara lifted the boxes, her face drained of color. Ethan hesitated, looking very young and very stubborn. Then he gathered the envelope, tucked it away, and followed her to the door. At 6:59 the latch clicked behind them. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the cooling tick of the stove. I stood very still and listened to the quiet truth of the room. I had been careful for 40 years. Now I would be something else. That night, the house felt colder than usual. I kept hearing the echo of Ethan's voice. We took a loan in your name. You do not use credit. We will pay it back. His words circled me like a noose. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once cut coupons, balanced my checkbook, and celebrated Ethan's birthdays with store-bought cakes. Now it held the evidence of betrayal, the forged loan statement, my folders of documents, and the envelope they had tried to trick me into signing. I opened the box where I kept the history of my life. The fireproof lockbox was small but heavy. Inside lay my mortgage deed, my retirement account statements, insurance records, even yellowed receipts for furniture I had paid off in the early 1980s. I kept everything because paper, unlike memory, did not lie. I lifted one folder at a time, tracing the careful handwriting on envelopes that had traveled with me through decades. Hospital bills paid in installments, tuition checks for Ethan's schooling, tax returns that showed my modest earnings. Each sheet testified to my discipline, my sacrifices. 40 years of never missing a payment. 40 years of believing that honesty and order were shields against chaos. Now those shields were pierced by the people I had protected most. I sat back and whispered aloud, "I am not going to pay for other people's debts." The sentence felt strange in my mouth, as if it belonged to someone braver than I had ever been. But the more I repeated it, the firmer it became. I remembered nights when I came home from the library, my feet blistered from standing all day, only to change shoes and head out again to clean offices until midnight. I remembered the winter of 1992, when I sold my engagement ring to cover the heating bill, telling Ethan it had been a voluntary choice so he would not feel guilty. I remembered lending my son and his wife $3,200 to fix their car 4 years ago, a debt that was never repaid. Every memory lined up like witnesses against the illusion that giving more would finally earn me peace. I opened the bank ledger. My neat rows of pencil entries stared back. March rent $650 paid, utilities $93. 47 paid. Pharmacy $29. 62 paid. My own life in order. And then beside it, the bank's foreign numbers. Loan open March 12th, balance $20,000, delinquent $15,400. A lie imposed on my truth. The choice hardened inside me. I would not carry that lie. My money was off the table. I gathered the folder labeled identification. The copies Ethan had once used under the pretense of helping me with taxes were all here. I saw the danger now. My social security number, my driver's license, the exact tools they had twisted into weapons. Carefully, I slid each one into a fresh envelope and locked it back into the fireproof box. Then I placed the box under my bed. The phone rang. Ethan's number glowed on the screen. I let it ring until silence returned. A minute later, Mara's name appeared, then disappeared. I turned the phone face down. I had nothing left to give them. Not explanations, not forgiveness, not my voice. By midnight, I was still awake, the house lit only by the weak glow of the lamp. I wrote in my notebook, line after line, as if engraving the decision into stone. I will not pay for others' debts. I will not be coerced. My credit belongs to me. The pen dug grooves into the paper. My hand cramped, but I did not stop until the words filled the page. I thought of what Ethan and Mara might do next. They would try to persuade, to guilt, to frighten me. Already they had hinted at memory loss, at confusion, painting me as an unreliable old woman. I knew the tactic. I had seen neighbors stripped of authority through whispers about senility, their children stepping in to manage their money. But I was not confused. I was clear. I locked the notebook in the drawer and closed the house for the night. Standing at the window, I saw the reflection of my own face, lined with years of effort, framed by the darkness outside. For the first time in decades, I felt something like armor settle over me. My money is off the table, I whispered again. The words rang steady, undeniable. The phone calls did not stop. By the third day, the ringing felt like a hammer against the walls. Ethan's number, Mara's number, then my son's. Each time I let it pass. But they were persistent. On March 18th, just after 8 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mara on my porch, her coat buttoned too tightly for the mild weather. Ethan stood behind her, shifting from foot to foot, his face pale. They carried no pizza boxes this time. No pretense of normalcy. Only a slim folder in Mara's hand. "Grandma," Ethan began, but his voice faltered. Mara stepped forward. "We need to talk inside." I blocked the doorway with my body. "Say it here." Her lips pressed together in annoyance. "Fine. You left us no choice. If you do not sign this acknowledgement, we will be forced to tell people you are losing your memory. I did not blink. Whose people? Your bank for one, she answered smoothly. And the doctor's office. We will explain that you are confused lately, that you misplace things, that you have trouble remembering conversations. It will not be hard. Everyone expects it at your age. Then, legally, you will not be responsible for your accounts. We will be appointed to manage them. Ethan's hands clenched. He would not meet my eyes. Is that why you are here? I asked. To declare me incompetent? Mara gave a little shrug, as if it were practical, inevitable. It is for your safety too. You know how vulnerable older people are. You should be grateful that we are willing to step in. I am not grateful, I said. She held out the folder. Then sign this and it ends here. Backdated consent. Just one page. We will handle the rest. I did not take it. I studied her calm face, the way her eyes did not flinch when she spoke of dismantling my life. She had rehearsed this. They both had. You practiced the lines, I said quietly, just as you practiced the excuse at the kitchen table. Ethan swallowed hard. Grandma, we did not want it to get ugly. But if you keep resisting, there will be consequences. People will think you are unstable. I thought of the ledger in my drawer, the notebooks filled with steady entries, the decades of exact payments. My whole life was a record against this lie. But lies had a way of moving faster than truth. I knew they could spread a story through the family, through neighbors, until even decent people doubted me. Still, I felt no fear, only a growing clarity. You may leave now, I told them. Mara's eyes narrowed. Do you want your neighbors to hear that you left the stove on twice last winter? That you mixed up your prescriptions? We can make a very convincing case. That will be your burden to carry, I said. Not mine. For a moment silence hung between us. Then Ethan burst out. We are family. Why are you doing this to us? I let my voice remain steady. I am not doing anything to you. I am simply refusing to pay your debts. Mara's hand tightened on the folder. You will regret this. She turned on her heel, dragging Ethan with her. He looked back once, his face a mixture of shame and defiance. Then they were gone. I closed the door and leaned against it. My breath was slow even. The house was silent except for the tick of the clock. That afternoon, I received a letter by hand delivery. No return address. Inside was a typed note. If you persist in denying this loan, we will request a medical evaluation. The court does not take kindly to elderly debtors who pretend confusion. Sign and return the attached form within 7 days to avoid escalation. The form was identical to the one Mara had waved at me. A blank line for my signature, my name typed neatly beneath. I folded the paper without touching a pen. I placed it in the same folder with the bank statement. Evidence. On March 20th, my son telephoned. This time I answered. His voice was strained, tired. Mom, listen. They told me what happened. You are making this worse for yourself. If you just cooperate, it will all blow over. Do you believe I took out a loan? I asked. A pause. Then, I believe you might have forgotten. It happens. Maybe you signed something without realizing. I did not forget, I said firmly. I did not sign. He sighed. Mom, please. They are trying to help you. If you fight, it will only end in embarrassment. I have endured embarrassment before, I said. I will not endure theft. He grew angry then, his voice sharp. Do not talk like that. Ethan is your grandson. He loves you. Mara has done nothing but care for this family. If you drag them into legal trouble, you will destroy us all. Then let destruction fall where it belongs, I said, and ended the call. For hours afterward, the silence pressed heavy. But beneath it, a new steadiness took root. They could threaten, they could whisper, they could drag lawyers to my doorstep. But I had my papers, my records, my resolve. That evening, I opened my notebook again and wrote 3 lines. They say I am losing memory. But I remember everything. They say I am unstable. But my records are stable. They say I must sign. I will not. On a damp morning, I walked back into the bank with my folder of papers and the steady breath I had taught myself over the last days. The branch manager met me in a glassed office and listened without interruption as I placed the delinquency notice and my ledger on the desk. "There is a loan here that is not mine," I said. She called their fraud specialist. He arrived with a laptop and a stack of printed pages. "We will review the application file, then the surveillance," he said. His voice was careful in the way of people trained to say uncomfortable things. I watched while he pulled up the application. The document was dated and stamped with the branch's imprint. The signature line bore my name with a slanted, unfamiliar hand. It looked like an imitation, hesitant in odd places, heavy in others, the kind of forgery someone attempts when they have never written those letters for real. "Turn on the video," I asked. The screen filled with the feed from the teller station. The footage showed two familiar shapes approaching the counter. They were my grandson and his wife. Mara stepped forward, placed a manila envelope on the counter, and the clerk slid a clipboard across. She picked up the pen. For a moment I felt the room tilt as I watched her write my name on the printed line. She presented an identity document. The clerk scanned it. A warning flashed on the screen, and then, oddly, the clerk bypassed it and continued. The camera caught the clerk's hesitation and the override command. They accepted a cashier's check at the window. The teller handed over the funds. Later frames showed one of them returning to the counter alone and receiving a small printed receipt. At another desk, the sizable portion of the proceeds was converted into an external transfer to an account that listed the couple's household in the title. On the back of the cashier's check, someone had signed an endorsement, my grandson's name scribbled across it. The fraud specialist froze the frame and enlarged the image of the signature in the scan attempt. "That identity document failed verification," he said. "The picture does not match the person who presented it." The clerk overrode the alert. We logged the override. I felt the blood leave my hands and then return cold and sure. "They used a fake ID," I said. "They used my name." The manager leaned forward, her expression softening. "We will place the loan on hold for fraud. We will retain the surveillance footage and produce it to the police. We will flag your account so new credit cannot be extended without strict verification. That is the first step." He handed me a blank affidavit and explained the process. I would sign a sworn statement that I had not applied, that the signature was a forgery, and that I had not received or benefited from the proceeds. The bank would freeze collection activity while they investigated. They recommended I file a police report and submit an identity theft complaint with the National Consumer Agency. They offered to help me with the forms. I wrote each sentence in the affidavit slowly, deliberately. I did not apply for this loan. I did not authorize anyone to apply on my behalf. The signature is not mine. When I signed my own name, the letters were narrow and steady, the same hand that had logged decades of payments. After I left the bank, I went directly to the police station. The officer who took my statement listened, took copies of the printed stills and the application, and promised to open an investigation. He explained the next steps in plain terms. The bank's retained footage would be requested, the counterfeit identification would be traced, and any transfers would be followed. I kept my copies and the officer's receipt in the folder. That afternoon I filed an identity theft report online and printed the confirmation. I called the bank's fraud desk to confirm the hold and to ask that the footage be preserved for legal retention. They confirmed it was already flagged. The bank agreed in writing to suspend collections on the loan while the matter was investigated. When I closed my front door behind me, I spread the pages across my kitchen table like evidence in a case I had been forced to bring into the light. Surveillance stills, a copy of the application with the forged signature, the bank's fraud hold acknowledgement, the police receipt, the identity theft confirmation. Each sheet was another small anchor against the rush of lies. That evening, messages came from Ethan and Mara begging me to call, to clear up the misunderstanding. My finger hovered over the phone, then dropped. I set the ledger on top of the folder and sat with the papers until the house warmed with light from the lamp. I read the stills again and whispered to the empty room, because I had to hear it myself. My money is off the table. The courthouse smelled of lemon cleaner and mildew. The kind of ordinary scents that make formal places feel smaller than the drama inside them. The hearing room was plain, paneled walls, rows of folding chairs, a heavy desk for the judge. I sat near the front with my folder of papers in my lap, the edges worn where I had carried them back and forth like an offering. I did not tremble. I had not trembled since I balanced 3 jobs and a mortgage by the skin of my teeth. This was only another kind of work. When the bailiff called my name, I rose and walked to the podium. My chest felt steady. My voice did too. I would tell what I knew and what I could prove. I had brought the bank stills, the printed application with the forged signature, copies of the cashier's check with the endorsement, the bank's fraud hold confirmation, and the police and identity theft reports. I had 2 witnesses, the bank fraud specialist and the teller who had raised the override flag. I had receipts showing amounts I did not receive. I had my ledger. That was enough. The defendants sat across the room, my grandson and his wife. They were smaller in that room than they had been in my kitchen. The attorney for the couple tried to make everything sound like a mistake. Words such as miscommunication and temporary measure rose and fell in the air. The judge, a woman with a long silvery braid, listened with an expression I have seen before on nurses and clerks, patient and exact. My grandson took the stand for the defense. He used the same soft cadence he had used at home when he wanted me to sign something. He said he had thought he was helping, that he had used copies of my documents I had given him, that he had believed I would not mind since I never used credit. He said they intended to repay everything. His voice tried for contrition. It sounded like rehearsal. Then the bank played the surveillance footage in the courtroom. It was small and grainy in a way that made every motion sharper. Mara stepped to the counter. She paused with the pen between her fingers. She wrote. She smiled at the clerk and handed over an ID that did not match her face. The clerk hesitated, then overrode the alarm. The recorded sequence showed the cashier's check leaving the teller's drawer and being endorsed later by my grandson. The prosecutor guided the playback to the moment the signature was written on the application. The script had the wrong slant, the wrong pressure. An imitation that could not match the narrow, careful letters I had used for 40 years. The judge watched, and so did the room. My grandson's attorney tried to argue intent, that they meant no harm, that they relied on representations the bank made about verification. The bank's fraud specialist spoke plainly. The identification had failed verification and the clerk bypassed the warning. The officer who had handled my report described following the transfers and the endorsement trail. Names, dates, ledger lines, they stitched together like a seam. The judge read the documents. She asked simple logistical questions which the bank answered in kind. The bank had already placed the account on hold and preserved the footage. The ledger of movements showed where the proceeds had gone. I felt something lift as the evidence resolved itself into fact. I had expected hearings to be full of fog and argument. This one cut straight to the bone. My grandson and his wife shifted in their seats. People who had watched me in church and at holiday dinners glanced away. My son was present. He sat with his hands folded, his face set into the unreadable expression of a man forced to choose between 2 truths. When it came time for closing statements, my lawyer, quiet, efficient, honest, showed the judge the plain sentence I had written in my affidavit. I did not apply, I did not authorize, I did not receive proceeds. He reminded the court of the forged signature, the counterfeit identification, the override on the bank system, the endorsement on the cashier's check, and the transfers out to accounts bearing the couple's household name. He asked the court to recognize the loan as fraudulent, and to find the defendants responsible for the debt, since they procured it. The room waited. The judge folded her hands, and in the hush I heard my own breath. That breath had been held for weeks. The court finds, she said, that the loan application was procured by false pretenses, supported by forged signature and counterfeit identification, and that the proceeds were diverted in a manner consistent with fraud. I recognized the loan as fraudulent. She paused long enough that the words landed. The defendants are ordered to repay the amount taken, and this loan will be rescinded from the plaintiff's credit file. The bank is directed to update all bureaus to reflect this determination, and to maintain all records for any further legal action. The judge's sentence unfolded like a key opening a door. I felt neither triumph nor triumphal lightness. I felt the quiet removal of a weight. My lawyer shook my hand and steadied me as if I had walked across a plank. Later, as the courtroom emptied, the prosecutor told me the bank would pursue recovery, and the police investigation would proceed. The couple's attorney said something about appeal options. My son stood a little away, eyes raw, and said, "I am sorry, Mom," which is the only apology I needed to hear from him right then. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight was ordinary and honest. I walked to my car with my folder under my arm, and the knowledge that the ledger would be corrected. People on the sidewalk resumed going where they were going. The world did not tilt in response to my small vindication. It was enough. At home, I sat once more at my kitchen table. The lamp threw a cone of warm light across the page of my notebook. I placed the documents I had carried, stills, bank letters, the judge's order, into a neat stack. I opened the notebook and wrote, steady and plain, "My debts are gone. This is my new account." I closed the cover and rested my hands on it. The sentence had the weight of law and the lightness of a promise kept. Outside, a child laughed somewhere down the block. I made a cup of tea and watched the kettle steam. The house was quieter now, but in that quiet I felt a kind of ordinary peace, less dramatic than revenge, truer than triumph. The rest of my life would be small and careful and entirely mine. After the hearing, nothing in my life snapped into bright relief. The change was quieter than that, like the soft settling of dust after a storm. Ethan and Mara left town within a few weeks. They called once, made promises about repayment, and then their voices went thin and rare. My son came by twice. The first time he left a folded note on the kitchen table. The second time he sat across from me and said plainly, "I am sorry." He did not explain. I did not demand more. The apology was a hinge. It opened a small door I could step through without pretending everything would be the same. The bank corrected my file. The credit bureaus updated their records. The notices stopped arriving in the mailbox like knives. Neighbors brought casseroles and quiet, ordinary conversations about the weather and the price of tomatoes. I accepted the casseroles on my terms. I returned favors when I wished, not because obligation knotted my hands. I put the folder of evidence in a small chest beneath the dining table. It rests there like a kept promise, not a trophy. I do not read it every day, but I know where it is. The ledger of my life, receipts, ledgers, the judge's order, remains as tidy as the boxes in my closet. Order is not the same as armor, but it is a boundary I can see and hold. In the mornings I tend the back garden. I planted lavender along the fence and a single row of rosemary by the shed. My hands in the earth are a practical liturgy. Watering teaches me rhythm. The scent of soil and herb is a quiet answer to the years I gave away. I write now in the notebook notations about the day, recipes I want to try, a short list of books I will read. Sometimes I copy the line I wrote the night the judge spoke. "My debts are gone. This is my new account." It is a small incantation and it keeps me steady. I am not untouched by sadness. It is odd to be estranged from family and still care for them. But the ache is not the same as being emptied. I have boundaries that are simple and clear. No signatures I did not write. No money moved without my consent. No coercion dressed as concern. The victory I wanted was never loud. It was the return of a life where the costs are mine to choose. I make tea, I read, I water the lavender. That, at the end of the day, is enough. Life often tests us in ways we never expect, but each trial shapes who we are. If my story resonated with you, let me know with a comment and a like. And please subscribe so you will be here when the next story arrives. Remember, no matter how heavy the burden, you are never truly alone.